Okay. Let's bring the volume down on that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to be making a painting by another one of my very favorite artists. Excuse me, I've just been wolfing down oven pizza while things are getting started here. So, sorry. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be making a painting by another one of my very favorite artists. This artist is probably not that well known here in Canada, where I am, but we're going to try to change a little bit of that today. The artist that we're going to be featuring today is Trilok Singh Chitarkar, and Chitarkar means artist in Punjabi. So Trilok Singh is probably the easier way to say his name. And so let's, this is the painting we're going to do here. I've got so many different things I want to talk about today that I'm a little bit flummoxed, I guess. So this is the painting. It's a landscape painting, and there is a bunch of different little meanings in here that we'll talk about as we go here. This is the tracing that I've done, and you can print out a copy of this tracing, which we are going to transfer onto a canvas in just a couple of seconds. If you're wondering, how do I get that tracing? Well, come on. Let's go here. If you look in the video description down below, there's a link to a Dropbox account, and you'll see in the Dropbox account there's a whole bunch of different names in here. The ones up here, these are all paintings we've already done. So if this is the very first time you're seeing today's class and you're wondering what the deal is, well, here's a whole bunch of other ones, including 40 other paintings we did in my entire 45 episode long How to Paint series. But if you're interested in painting the Mona Lisa or Georgia O'Keeffe here, Al Loving's cool cube that we did right off at the beginning, A.Y. Jackson's landscape painting, or Sobha Singh's painting. This is the one we did just a few days ago. You can click on that, but we're going to click on here, the Trilok Singh here. And you'll see there's these files inside. There's the there is two versions of the tracing. One is a JPEG, one's a PDF. They're otherwise identical. And then the original painting itself. I should mention just really briefly, and I do this with a lot of the artworks, is I have extended the top and bottom of this painting. So the actual top, painting, painting itself is a little bit closer. Let's see if we just clip that. That's sort of more like what the original painting looks like, but in order to make it fit on a 9x12 canvas or an 8.5 by 11 canvas, I've just extended it a little bit for that purpose. Okay. Also, so let's, before I kind of launch right into the painting, I also want to mention that there is a private Facebook group just for people like you who are watching me and painting along with me. And you'll see there's currently 86 members. It goes up by 2 or 3 each week, which is perfect. There's a couple of quick questions you have to answer, and I would say 5 or 6 people every week, but some of them, you know, they literally say, "No, I'm not watching your class," and I think, oh, that's interesting. Why would you want to be a part of this group if you're of no interest in watching the videos? Anyway, so we get to see all the really cool artwork that people are making in the class. Look at this. Here's the Georgia O'Keeffe we painted. Way to go, Josh. Look at that. Lady with Ermine by Leonardo da Vinci. That's cool. So there's also people who are doing their own thing and uploading their own paintings to here, to the Facebook group, and getting feedback from myself and other people who happen to already be a part of it. So let's jump right in and start talking about our artist for today, Trilok Singh. And I love this picture. I want a picture like that of myself. That's like the quintessential artist portrait. I love that. He's got his paintbrush there, the intensity of the gaze. That's fantastic. Anyway, Trilok Singh, lived a long life, 1914 to 1990. He was, if you know anything about the India and World War II, you know that India was sort of divided up after the war into two countries, Pakistan and India. And the area that Trilok Singh is from, Punjab, is in the northwest corner of India, and was right there, was basically cut in half after World War II. So, just like our previous artist from last week, Sobha Singh, was also on the Pakistani side and left and moved into the Indian side after the war. So, or not the war, but, well, I guess after World War II. And, of course, that caused all sorts of upheaval. He seems to have been very successful quite early and became a so-called like official artist, government artist at a relatively young age, like in his 30s, and continued to enjoy a great deal of commercial success, of critical success, and like official government success. Right? You have to keep in mind that every country's different, and every culture's different, and how they treat artists is also very different. And it is not uncommon. It wasn't even this was kind of the norm actually in most places up until maybe 100 years ago, but pretty much everywhere around the world, a country might have an official artist, right? Jacques-Louis David was a French artist who was the official artist to Napoleon, for instance. And that kind in the Western world has slowly kind of fell out of favor, but we still have things like poet laureates, right? Which it's odd that we don't have art or painter laureates, although that was, I don't think they called it painter laureates, but we did have similar kinds of things for hundreds and hundreds of years. It would be good to have something like that again. Anyway, so I think it talks about in here that he moved around a lot. His teacher, this Chitarkar Singh, was also a very famous Indian artist as well. And I think is there a story in here? Trilok Singh's father noticed that his son was a pretty talented artist at a relatively young age, as I've said, and sent him to apprentice with Chitarkar Singh. And I think it's this story. Sent him to Calcutta to take more guidance. Oh yeah, and Chitarkar Singh scolded Trilok Singh when Trilok Singh's father sent him money, because he said, it should go the other way. You should be making the money and sending your family the money. That's what I'm going to tell our daughter as well. Like, when you get out there, I want you sending me money, right? Anyway, pretty much for most of his career, the main thing that the main preoccupation of Trilok Singh's career was illustrating the stories of the 10 human gurus that form the basis of the Sikh religion. That's another thing I've learned over the last while. It's not Sikh, it's Sikh. Well, it's actually, I'm not even pronouncing that properly, which I totally apologize. I'm doing the very best I can with my limited heathen knowledge to represent an artist that I feel very strongly about. But anyway, so Trilok Singh spent most of his life depicting. Let me see if we scroll down to some of these images. The lives of the various different gurus here. So here's Guru Nanak, who was the very first guru, and then he did. I haven't been able to find it, but apparently he illustrated. There's a whole series of paintings about Guru Gobind Singh, who was the subject of this painting we did last week. So apparently there's a whole series of paintings that depict Guru Gobind Singh's travels, which I think would be super cool to find. I think, again, one of the problems, the difficulties that I had with compiling today's episode is 99% of all the information about this artist is in another language, or in other languages besides English. So I can only speak French and English, so there's a lot of stuff I wasn't able to understand. Plugging things into Google Translate was a little difficult. So he was illustrating the stories of the gurus, and the gurus are like the foundational figures of the Sikh religion, and beyond that, he was also really interested in illustrating, like it says here, like romantic stories, legends from India and Hindu religion. We see his landscapes, of which this one is one of the one that we're going to talk about today. And I think one of the other really interesting things that he spent a great deal of his time doing was illustrating the Punjabi encyclopedia, which is like, so he did thousands of these illustrations like this here. Like, isn't that cool? Like, I mean, these are beautiful drawings. But I imagine that there's, even though he's well known in India, there is probably tens of millions of people who have seen his art, grew up with his art in the encyclopedias that they had in the schools where they studied, that have no idea that they were looking at Trilok Singh's art inside the encyclopedia. And just like most artists, we have to do all sorts of crazy things to survive, and making thousands of illustrations to illustrate the encyclopedia is probably not the worst job that you could ever have. I think that's really cool. What else do I want to say here? This I almost wanted to paint this painting today. I thought this would be kind of a cool one. These whales attacking a whaling ship. There is, he did like a whole series of images translating the Punjabi alphabet from Hindi back into Punjabi and Bengali, which I thought is really interesting. I wonder how those were used. Again, some of this information is not readily available to an English speaker. This is also a fairly famous painting of his as well. But since we've painted a number of people recently, and I've heard a few of you say you'd rather paint not another portrait or another person, I thought, okay, well, let's paint the landscape, right? So, okay, let's jump right into this. So, where should we go? Let's go here. Oh, while I get set up, this is a great little book. Let me just get this focused here. This book, actually this whole series of very short introduction are great books, right? They're small, thin books. And if you're thinking about learning about any topic, really, you can see in here, they have like pretty much a book on everything, from the American Revolution to astrobiology, art history, Catholicism, comedy, Dada and surrealism, Goethe, German literature, Druids, dreaming, philosophy in the Islamic world, schizophrenia, Schopenhauer, science fiction, viruses, water, etc. So there's a lot of really interesting texts for anyone who's really interested in learning a little bit more about Sikhism or Sikhism, which is also an English word too. There's no basis. That's another thing I've learned. That word has no meaning. Although I guess it is now sort of in a roundabout way become adopted by people in the Sikh community. So let's transfer this image here. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to line my picture up. Generally, the way that I think about these kinds of things is, you know, I'm probably going to give a little bit more space to the top of the picture. Like if I had to go up or down, sideways, or if I had a smaller canvas, I'd probably trim off the top of the sky. But in this case, I think I'm probably going to put it pretty close. Maybe I'll take it down a little bit. But, okay. And then I'm going to tape that off. And then I'm going to take a piece of carbon paper. You can use graphite paper, carbon paper. I have used this. You can kind of see how many times I've used this. I've used this many, many times. I think I'm going to, because there's a lot of detail in this image, I'm going to use one that hasn't quite been used as much. You can see Al Loving's cube on there. But I'm going to save this old one just in case I need it. Okay, so I take this graphite paper. Let's just put it right underneath here. You know, it appears to be a very complicated image. I'm not going to copy all of the details onto my canvas here. Actually, you know what? I forgot to do this last class as well. I want to sand this down before I trace onto it. Here's a block of 220 grit sandpaper. Okay. You know, one thing you may notice, well, there's all that powder that just wiped off. I used to have paint all over this shirt. You may, because I often wipe my paint all over my clothes. Out of interest, I use this spray that I have. It's like an anti-graffiti spray that you can spray onto different surfaces to get paint of any kind off of surfaces. I use it when I'm teaching in person so that if people spill paint all over the floor, I can quickly clean it up. Anyway, I sprayed it on the shirt, put it in a bucket, and let it sit overnight, and then washed it out. And look at that, all the paint came right off. It did, I think, take some of the dye in this shirt out as well, which didn't surprise me. I'm actually surprised that it didn't just go white. But good to know, because some of that paint had been in there for, I don't know, 6 months now. And one of the things I think is interesting, just as I'm tracing down here, is, let's see, I'm going to bring up, check out how in this image, is it just me, or does this, I don't know, are these supposed to be rocks, Or does this not look like a cow possibly, and a guy milking a cow? Or maybe it's supposed to be rocks with a hidden message in there. I don't know. So anyway, just I want to mention that as we begin here, because just like any other artist from any other culture, artists are infamous for inserting secret images into artworks for all sorts of various reasons. Sometimes because the story is complex, and there are kind of like little winks to people who know the backstory behind the story being illustrated. We see this in Christian art all the time, right? Like in Christian art, there's all sorts of symbols are used, like, wow, I mean, I could think of a million things. Like, you might see things like an empty shoe, or shoes, kind of empty shoes somewhere, and usually that's meant to signify someone who's, you know, a dead baby, or someone who's unable to have children. Right? I think it's super interesting, you know, to see how artists use those little symbols and hidden meanings in their artwork. And then, of course, there are artists who put, let me see if, do I have carbon paper under, just shift that over. There are artists who literally put in little kind of, what would you say, like subversive things in there that basically contradict the theme or idea behind the painting itself. So an example of that might be the artist Caravaggio, who was an artist. I'd love to do a painting on Caravaggio. It's just his paintings are a little bit more complex, you know, quite so realistic paintings of people, religious scenes. He was a late Renaissance painter, kind of towards the Baroque period, and he was often found himself running afoul of the law and of the church, and I think he took a little bit of a kick out of being commissioned by the church to make artworks, and then he would do things to undermine the church actually in his paintings. You have to remember 500, 400 years ago when he was painting, the church was the only game in town. They're the only ones who were going to buy your paintings. So if you weren't making religious art, you would have had to have a lot of money. You would have had to have been from a very wealthy family, because otherwise there's just no market for your art. I did a whole art project on Caravaggio, and one of his paintings, Saint Matthew and the Angel, which is one of his most famous paintings, and he did several versions of it. The first version was rejected by the church that commissioned him to do it, so he painted another one. And in both cases, even though he changed the picture slightly, he just sort of added a different kind of subversive element into the picture. So let's see how we're going to paint over all of this background. You see, I'm not really doing every single line here. I just want the basics in place. We got these bears up here. I think this will probably be, again, something that when I get to painting that, I will look back at the original for guidance. And same with these birds up here. Just because also my pencil is not sharp enough to get all that detail in. Okay, so let's just take a quick look, see how we did. Pretty good. Okay. So, you know, because you know, my photocopy doesn't quite go edge to edge, we have the option of potentially adding, let's say, another tree here, or another tree here, adding another rocks, or whatever you want to do in these different places. Okay. So, we'll move out of the way. Oh, lots of things in the chat tonight. Let me get to that as we get started here painting. So the next thing I want to do, let's get some paint out, and we're going to put some paint on top of this image we just traced here. As I always say, all the materials that you could possibly need for this entire class fit inside of a shoebox. You can buy everything that we are using for about $100. And that $100 investment should last you for, if you're painting along with me, you can make about 50 to 60 paintings minimum with just the materials we have. Like, so for instance, this red and this blue I bought back in September. I've made about, how many paintings I made? About 65, 70 or so, I'm not sure how many. Right, and there's still enough in here to do maybe another 30 paintings. The only things that I've had to replace are my white and my warm yellow. Otherwise, we've got lots left over. I know that was the question. The reason why I mentioned that is because that was the question, and is the question I get asked all the time when people ask me about supplies. How long will the paint last? Should I get like a big jug of it, or how long will one of these tubes last? And of course, the answer to that question is really hard to answer because, you know, some people use a lot of paint when they paint. There's lots of professional artists. One of the artists that I studied with and worked for after I graduated from my master's program in California, he would use twice as much paint as we're using now on one painting. Right? He made these big, super thick paintings. His name is James Hayward, or is James Hayward. He's still around. He's a cowboy painter living in Los Angeles. Okay, so let's take a look at this painting here. Now, what color? Generally what we would do is put down a warm yellow underneath the painting. And that's what I think I'm going to do today. It's hard to tell with this painting how he did it. But I think we'll sort of stick with the process we've been using for a while. So what I'm going to do, this is really the only time I add water in a painting when I'm painting with acrylics. I'm just going to put a little bit of water in here, mostly just to thin it down so that the paint really gets into all the nooks and crannies. And also so that it dries a little bit faster. And it's not quite as opaque. It'll be a little bit more transparent, which is perfect because we want to be able to see all these lines very easily as we go forward. There's a little bit cut off on the side there, so. Okay. And I'm just going to clean my workspace up just a bit. So I don't have to use that hardcore spray to clean my table as I do every couple of days because this paint. There we go. When you're doing this, you don't really want to scrub too much. Like, you don't notice how I'm not, you know, it's on there and there might be a couple little streaks. This is called an underpainting. And the underpainting is just that. It's the painting that's going to exist underneath the finished painting. So it's not overly critical that it looks good in any way whatsoever, because it's going to get covered up. The main thing is you maybe don't want to have too much texture, because that texture might come through, which in itself is not bad and can look pretty cool. But if you have a big glob of paint going, let's say, in an underpainting, and then you're trying to paint a face over top of it, and then you have this weird bit of texture going through the face, that's the only time where it's kind of a little bit frustrating. Okay. Let's I'm gonna grab a few paintbrushes so we can get started here. I think we're going to be using mostly some smaller brushes today. So, getting out my kind of the smaller stuff. Quite proud of myself. I don't know if you remember, there was some of these paintbrushes where this metal part, the ferrule as it's called, had come off of the wood. Remember, these are cheap brushes that we're using. You're certainly welcome to use more expensive brushes. I just really want people to see that you can make paintings by the masters with the cheapest materials humanly possible, so you don't feel like you have to go out and spend thousands of dollars. I'm not going to use all of these paintbrushes. These are just my smaller ones. I will probably use this one. I tend to, when I find a paintbrush I really like, I tend to use it all the time. So that's what and I just literally paint with it until the bristles wear completely away. I'll use those, and then I just put these ones aside in case I need them. But generally, that should be more than enough. Okay, so let's put those here. Okay, and I saw there was all these comments in the chat. So while this dries, I may use my blow dryer to blow dry this. Before that dries, actually, I want to share one thing. No, you know what? I'll do that maybe next episode. I see Heidi's here. Hi, Heidi. I saw you said something about how you were going to finish one of your paintings today while you're watching me paint today, which is great. I know a lot of you guys do that. I know there's people who watch the first time around and often paint a different painting, or just sit and watch, and then watch it again while they're painting live, because they want to be able to focus maybe a little bit more on their painting. However you make your painting, I think it's cool. I have no judgment. There's Joshua says, hi everyone, I hope everyone's having a good day, doing well. I'm excited to paint along today. It says, wow, what an amazing book. Where did you purchase the book? I'm interested. The Sikhism book, or Sikhism book, by Eleanor Nesbitt. I got this from the library, so here in Vancouver. But It's from Oxford Press, Oxford University Press. I'm sure you can get. I'll put a link to the Amazon link if you want to buy it there. But I'm sure they have on their own website. Let me see. Eb Friesen says, I enjoy outdoors, and so tonight's painting will be enjoyable. I think it's a cow with a person milking the cow. These right down here. That's what I thought too. It was funny. I didn't even notice it until I was doing the tracing that I showed that you can download and buy, or not buy, but you can download, print out, and transfer onto your canvas here. And remember, everything I'm providing to you is free, right? So if anyone's thinking about making a donation, there is a link to that down below too, right? Let me see. Yeah, when I was tracing it, I was like, what is that? Looks like... It's funny because that's probably exactly what Trilok wanted, a little bit of that. Like, a lot of artists like to reward people who take that extra minute to look at a painting. Most people, this is a terrifying, if you're an artist, statistic to think about, but generally people look at art, even the most famous paintings in the world in museums, for roughly 7 seconds, right? So that's like standing in front of the Mona Lisa, looking at Mona Lisa. Cool, okay. Right, that's how long people look at the Mona Lisa, or you know, any of the other great artworks from... So how long are people going to look at art paintings? We would hope that they look at them for 7 hours and just sit and rapture it, but that's not necessarily the case. So artists often put these little tiny things in there to reward people who do look a little bit longer. Sue says, you're right, it certainly looks like a guy milking a cow and a young calf suckling too. Let's see, let's just zoom. Right, I mean, and then what is this? What's happening here? Is this another bear or a person? Is this a little bear cub here? Is this another one looking over its shoulder? There's a lot of stuff going on. And then when I see that, I start wanting to look around the rest of the painting and think, is there something in these mountains that I'm not seeing in here? Like, is this a wolf's mouth, or you know, a rabbit trying to jump up the side of a fence? Is there faces or anything in here? Like, is this a bear on its hind legs? You know, like, it gets like, it's one of those things, it's really interesting when we start thinking about stuff like that. Jeanette says, nice, I think I'm going to make that one. Deborah says, hi everyone, I'm a little late. I will have to do this after I get caught up with the other paintings, so I so enjoy listening in on these classes. Thank you, Deborah, I appreciate that. Shelley says, it looks like there's a whole bunch of things in those rocks. To me, I can see some bears or some sort of animals. Joshua says, I think Pope Julius II commissioned Michelangelo to create iconic works such as Sistine Chapel and the tomb of Pope Julius II. Also commissioned Raphael to paint a portrait of Pope Julius II. And Sue says, yes, Shelley, lots of animal-shaped rocks. Yeah, Joshua, you are right. The Pope did commission Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel, among other things. You can read all the letters that Michelangelo and the Pope wrote back to one another. They all still exist. The Romans and the Italians afterwards kept meticulous records, and you can literally read Michelangelo expressing his great dismay over having to make a painting on what was then the barn for the Pope's animals, because Michelangelo was a sculptor, right? And he's like, okay, wait a second, I'm a sculptor, and you want me to paint the ceiling of your barn? Well, I mean, I can paint, but I don't make... Is this a good thing, or am I in trouble? right? Because, you know, back then, running afoul of the Pope would have been, you know, a death sentence, quite literally. There's a great documentary by PBS called The Medicis, the Godfathers of the Renaissance. Great. I think it's a two-part, I think it's on YouTube. I think you can watch the videos on YouTube. Anyway, really cool. No. Okay, I wanted to I forgot here, I wanted to show, here's another picture of Trilok Singh here, painting. That there's a website that was set up, Trilok Singh Artist, and this has a lot of his paintings. A lot of the paintings that you see there on Wikipedia were taken from his website. Here's another picture of him as a little bit more recent photo. I thought the other one was a little bit more dramatic. And also that's where I got the photo, the image of today's painting from this website. So I don't know if this is his family or estate or who. You can even email them. All the information is down there at the bottom. Okay, so let's get on with things. I think I'm just going to blow dry this. It's still a little bit wet. I was trying to kill a little bit of time there. Okay, so let's take a look at the painting and think about how we're going to proceed next. You can already see that the mountains in the background have been painted. They're almost like the same yellow, this warm yellow in the mountains. I'm going to suggest that we use a little bit cooler colors in the background as we paint that, even though it's not exactly how Trilok did his painting. I think just so we can kind of build on some of the knowledge that we've been using throughout past episodes, but I'll show you how we do everything here. I think the first thing that I'm going to do, well, besides getting some paint on here, is paint the background. Or at least give a bit of paint into the background that we can then use later. So I'm going to put all my paints out on the palette. 2 blues, 2 reds, and 2 yellows. If today's the first time you're painting along with me, then you want to know what that means. Why 2 reds and 2 yellows and 2 blues and not 2 greens and a brown. And don't even think we're going to use black. Maybe a little bit of black at the very end. And we'll use a bit of white. But basically, from the colors we have here, we can make 99.999% of every single color that is visible to human beings, which I think is fantastic. And I think over the past 70 episodes or so, we've kind of proven that to be the case. Because people will argue with me all the time, how come we're not using... you know, I saw that, you know, somebody else, another YouTuber uses like a green and 3 browns and 1 yellow, 1 red, and blah, 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 and a purple. How come, like, what's... We can, all of those colors, we can mix even within here. So, I would prefer to have all of the options available to me, and then restrict myself from there, right? It's sort of like having, what an example of would be a kitchen, and, you know, like on a cooking show, I love those, like, Top Chef or whatever, if you had a kitchen that had every single possible food in the kitchen, and no matter what you want to make, you could make it. You could rush in there like, oh, I'm gonna make, I don't know, a paella, or I'm gonna make a pizza, or I'm gonna make a soup. No matter what kind of soup you want to make, you've got every ingredient available. Rather than you walk in there and there's like, okay, we've got an apple, an orange, flour, and baking powder. It's like, whoa, okay, what am I gonna make with that, right? So I'd prefer to have every option available to me, and then yeah, anyway. Why am I talking about this? I don't know. Let's mix the background here. So that background is like a cool blue gray. So why don't we start off, we're gonna mix that color. We'll start off with some of the cool blue. And then we're gonna take, so basically to make it gray, we're gonna mix 2 blues. We need basically 4 of these colors in here to make it gray. So it's just basically a matter of what kind of gray do we want to make, right? So the cheap, fast, easy way to make it gray is just to get a gray paint from the art supply store, squeeze it out, maybe mix a bit of this blue into it, and boom, you're done. That is fantastic if you have it, but I always think it's better to learn how to do all of this with just these 7 tubes of paint. So we're going to take this cool blue, I'm going to take some warm blue. Alright, we can mix that there. I'm going to take some of this cool yellow, and I'm choosing cool over warm because we want it to be a cool blue gray in the background. Remember, cold colors recede. They seem to go backwards into the background, whereas warm colors appear to advance. They appear to come towards us when we're looking at a picture, right? So we want to make a cool gray. So I'm taking cool blue and cool yellow. I put the warm blue in here. That's my little X factor to help it go gray. And then I'm going to take some cool red in here. And almost immediately when we put that red in here, this color goes kind of muddy. It looks like the most least saturated blue possible, which is great. That's exactly what we want. We want to make a gray, right? And just as a quick review for anyone who's new watching, right? So we took the cool blue and the cool yellow, and together they make a kind of nice the brightest green we could possibly mix. We then put a little bit of this warm blue in there. So we kind of pulled it out off of the most intense, and we're pulling it towards the neutral core a bit, right? And then we went all the way across here, and we took some of this cool red. So we basically had like we mixed a green, we added the warm blue in that pull it here, and we added the cool red, which pulls it right towards the neutral core, right in the center. And I'll prove to you that we've got a gray simply by adding a little bit of white. All right, and so we've now got this. This is basically the color that we want right here. If you find it's too green, that means you've got maybe a little bit too much yellow, and I would just add a little bit more blue to it. If you find it looks a little too purpley, that's probably because you got a little bit too much red in there. So it's always just a bit of modifying things a little bit, kind of going back and forth. So I'm just going to take a bigger scoop of this paint and a big scoop of white, just so I have lots of paint mixed up as I paint this. And You know what? I'm just going to use, I was going to modify this a little bit, but we're probably going to paint over it a second time anyway. So we'll just use the paint that we have here for this process. And you see all these little birds here. I'm going to kind of, in fact, I'm going to paint a little bit of that first. I'm just going to quickly paint around them a little bit. Not so much to capture any details, but just so that I remember that they are in this vicinity. You could paint the birds black right now. That way it'll be a little bit easier for you to find these details, but I'm just going to kind of paint around them. Like this. You know, now that I do this, I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I probably should, just for everyone else's sake, I probably should have painted them black. Because not everybody will be able to do what I just did, so. There is these little pink clouds in there. Don't worry about painting that even right now. I'm just going to paint right over top of all of this. Paint right over top of these branches. And even though it's not in the painting, maybe I'll just give a little bit of, like, that's where another tree will be off on the side here. Okay, so you see it's kind of, you know, not kind of almost like a little bit sloppy the way that I'm painting. This is, again, this is still part of our underpainting. Maybe I'm just going to kind of quickly brush over a bit of that. I can still see some of those details. Maybe you can't on camera, but that's okay. I mean, it's we also, remember, we always have the tracing, the paper version, and this tracing to kind of help us refer to as we get to that point, which will be very shortly from here. Right, we're going to move on to that in just a few minutes. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of red into this color here. I'm just going to add a little bit. And that's going to make it go a little bit more purple. Maybe I'll take a bit more of the warm blue in here as well. Take a bit of warm blue, red. I'm going to use this for painting some of the shadows in the mountain there. I'm going to do that. So I've got this color mixed up. Because I haven't added any new white to it, it should be just a little bit darker. Okay. And I'm just going to do a quick, you know, take on some of this detail on the mountain itself. So don't worry about making this all perfect. We're going to come back, we'll do another few layers of things. I just want to kind of start blocking in the main aspects of this painting here. There's going to be some trees that are there. And you know, we'll darken some of this here. Maybe we'll just put a few. So you can see mostly what I do is sort of work from the background forward. And then when I get all the way to the front, I go back to the background and I finish the background, and then I work my way back towards the foreground, and then ideally I should be done by that point. But there are times where I have to go back and work on the background a third time. So that's pretty good. Let's see. Some kind of rock stuff going on here too. Even though they're in a different space, they're closer to us. I'll probably put something over top of that as well, another as we go forward in a bit. Okay. So I'm always just sort of trying to see if there's any other places where I need to put the paint that I've got on my paintbrush onto the canvas. I feel like that's probably pretty good for right now. Okay. So, you know, speaking of which, why don't we take a little bit of attempt at some of these critters in the sky, these hawks and crows, I think. So I'm actually just going to, without even bothering to wash my brush, remember this is the first color we made here that we just mixed with white to paint the sky. So I've got this paint already mixed here. It actually looks pretty darn close to these eagles that are in the sky. So why don't we zoom right in. Okay. And again, without spending much time on here to get details, I'm just gonna kind of block in where this hawk should be. I mentioned I could have done this right off the bat. The reason why I didn't do it off the bat, even though it might have been a little bit easier, is trying to paint around all these details is just like a real slow slog, and I'd rather just sort of get going. Okay, here's this goose head, and I think this is goose body here. We'll define all these things later on. There's a bird that I painted out. I'm not even going to bother painting its legs and stuff because we will probably paint all that out the next time around. You know, you could, I was considering potentially enlarging these birds, but decided against it. Didn't want to compromise the integrity of the painting too much by starting to really change things, but you could certainly do that if you wanted to. Right, so you see that, you know, I've just kept things pretty simple here. I didn't bother painting in the feathers or, you know, it's going to say the beak, or this should be good enough. Because we're probably going to paint maybe even over top of some of this in later on anyway. So the less that I have to do a second or third time, the better. So let's take a look. Let's do these little bears in the trees here. So we've got one of them. And we got another one hanging here. Okay. And, you know, maybe while I'm right here, why don't we mix a brown that we can use, and I can start painting some of these trees. So, let's zoom out here. Just going to wash this brush. Wash both of these brushes that I've used. Okay. Deborah asked, did I miss something? What is the story of the hawk snatching the diamond? Good question. Deborah, you haven't missed anything. To be honest, I don't know what the actual original story is of the hawk snatching the diamond. I don't know how it plays into Sikh religion, or if it's just a story that Trilok Singh invented. So to be honest, I did do as much. I spent hours trying to dig up that information. I'm sure that information exists somewhere, just not in English. So if someone is watching this now or 5 years from now, I would love it if you were able to put some of that information in the comments down below, if you know the actual origin of the meaning of the hawk snatching the diamond. And again, it's also unclear to me as to what the story behind this and some of the other paintings are, and if this, as I said, Trilok Singh illustrated the life and teachings of the different gurus, specifically Guru Gobind Singh, who was again the artist that we painted last, or the guru that we painted last Tuesday, and so it's potentially that this is like this is the landscape that guru walked through, and the hawk snatching the diamond has some significance to the teachings or the stories and adventures. I have no idea. That's my but again, this was another reason I chose this painting is I wanted to find an image that was as, at least on the surface, as innocuous as possible, that didn't have any religious connotations, or at least overt religious connotations, because I didn't want people to think that the only thing that Sikh artists paint are, illustrations of the teachings of the gurus. I wanted people to know that that there's lots of other, that Sikh artists paint all sorts of different things, just like anyone from any other culture does as well, right? So, did I make a good decision or not? I have no idea. Potentially this is infused with all sorts of double meanings that are way over my head. Okay, so I was going to paint a brown here before I went off on my tangent. Okay, so to make a brown, and we're going to paint, these trees are in the middle ground and foreground. So we're going to make a warm brown. Just as we could make a cool brown, we're going to make a warm brown. So how we make a warm brown? Let's take some of the warm yellow and warm red. Mix that together. I'm just going to make a little bit more of each so that I have a nice pre-mixed brown that I can use throughout today's painting. Alright, so right now I've got, looks like a little bit of white snuck in there, but that's okay. My brush obviously wasn't totally clean. You could see some of this stuff yellow coming out of it. Okay, so I took warm yellow, warm red, and I'm going to take some warm blue. Let's just mix these together. That's a really nice brown, actually. So this is a little bit more of a reddish orangey brown, which I think will be a perfect color for us. If we put more blue in it, it's obviously going to get darker and darker. If we put some more yellow into it, it's going to brighten up a little bit more. And obviously if we put more red into it, this is already a fairly red leaning brown, warm red leaning brown. I think that's going to be perfect for us. So I'll put that to the side. I'm going to grab my small brush again, and actually just going to, I'm going to work my way left to right just because I'm right-handed. I'm just going to put this down here. Now I might go over it with some white a little bit later, but I'm just kind of, so it's not a totally straight line here. I'm going to mix, I'll put some, I might even, I'll definitely put some brown into here as well as we get going. See how when I'm doing these trees, I don't have the most stable hand anyway, but I do deliberately allow a little bit of shake, or I intensify that in order to try to get a little bit more of an organic form, right? I don't want it to look like a light post, or you know, I want it to look like it's a tree, and so I kind of allow my hand to be a little bit wobbly. And I could probably have used a little bit wider of a brush, but and you know, I forgot to, since I painted this area here, but I haven't actually drawn this tree here. Put a few little branches in under here. You know, you can always paint completely these sort of things completely out. But you know, every tree needs some kind of structure inside of it. So having some of these lines under there will just sort of remind the viewer that there was some structure there at some point, right? Okay, we got this. And feel free to be like with this branch kind of coming down. I'm going to make these other ones kind of pointing a little bit further up so that we understand this branch is a little bit heavy with a couple of little bears on it. I just noticed these branches are probably, this branch is a broken branch because maybe the bears are climbing up. Is that what? Right? Sometimes it's like you don't even, I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but it's not even really even until I start painting these other artists' paintings where I actually am able to really look at them carefully and I start seeing all these. I'm like, oh, now I see what's going on here. Okay. So I'm going to take this same brown. I'm going to put it in this path. It may lighten it up at some point as well, but okay. That's cool. Okay. Let's so the next thing I do, I've got all of this stuff painted. I want to look around, see if there's anything else that needs this exact brown at first, right? I look, there is these rocks. I think there's going to be some brown in them, but I'm probably going to modify the color just a little bit so that there isn't a confusion between the brown of the trees and the brown of the rocks. I don't want people to think that these are chunks of wood down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop some of this brown out, and maybe I don't need quite so much. I'm going to add a bit more blue to it. I'm going to add just a bit of white to it as well. So this is going to be for these rocks. Not everywhere on those rocks, but let's start painting some of the darker aspects here. Now this is kind of tricky because it's like we've got, you know, these shapes in here, and how much of these details do we want to try to make come through. I think some of this will be later on when I'm towards the end of the painting. I'll probably work on that and bring some of those details back out. But for now, like personally, I'm not going to worry too much about making all of these details down here super convincing, like, because, you know, that's I don't think it's as important for us to appreciate this painting, getting all of these details here. So and, you know, we can lighten up any of this stuff. We can change it, darken it as we go, and we will. Kind of invent a little bit of a rock or two. Like what takes place over here? Like what kinds of... Is there more rocks leading up to the side of the hill? I don't know. It's your guess. What exists outside of Trilok Singh's frame here? Okay. just going to use this same gray over here. Just going to outline. Now, I know there's lots of little rocks here, so I'm not going to do all of them. First, I'm just sort of kind of outlining them a bit. I'm just inventing all this stuff here, in case you're wondering. I mean, I did include a bunch of it in the tracing, but okay. And then once again, I just sort of look around and think, okay, is there anywhere else that this darker kind of rock gray that I've created should go? I don't think so. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more white. And I'm just going to now paint kind of the whiter aspects of these rocks right over this paint. And not in a particularly careful way either. Maybe I'll just zoom in. This is all stuff that, should you wish to dive into the details, you can, but right, so this, it kind of goes from defined to a little bit obscure again as I paint this other layer in. It starts to kind of, we're like, oh, you just sort of clarified things and now you're making it muddy again. That's really, I find like that's the story of painting, is kind of that constant back and forth between clarity and confusion. And you know, when you're learning to paint, that first, it's hard to sit in that confused state, right? The rest of our lives are all about trying to clarify things and understand things, and why on earth would you deliberately put yourself in a situation where you're confused and you know, whereas painting is almost like you deliberately, it's like an amusement park ride where you're like, okay, I'm going to subject myself to something that's going to be very uncomfortable deliberately, and then we'll see how things work, right? Okay, maybe I'll keep that there. Remember, I haven't used any black whatsoever, just mixing that gray all by itself. Let's take some of the same color here and just kind of it's almost like impressionism or pointillism, you know, just sort of layering down a bunch of these little blobs of color with the hope that at some point we're going to make things look a little clearer. Okay. I also want to see, is there anywhere in this up here that I can put this color that I've used? I might just add it in a few places. With the idea that when I paint other colors over top of it, which I will, it'll just sort of, this color, which is just gonna complicate those colors. It'll mix with them and will create a richer, more believable kind of a space. Okay. Let's just look down here. Anything? I might just take a bit of this. You don't have to, but okay, cool. Let's just check and see where we're at. Okay, we're making pretty good time. I might not feel like that, but we've got a lot of the most important stuff on the canvas already. So I'm just gonna clean this brush. Hi, Peter. Why, hello there, Live Nation, he says. I'm not able to make these classes live for a while, but it looks like Michael has made enough content to keep me painting well into the summer. Well, that's good. Lots of stuff on its way. On later this week, on Thursday, we're going to be painting one of the earliest images of Batman for something completely different. So we're going to go right back to the very beginning, Bob Kane's the first appearance of Batman, which is among my most favorite depictions of Batman. So stay tuned for that. Okay. So I just noticed there was some texture that was quite thick there in that branch. I noticed it when I was painting it, but it didn't go down, so I just scrape it right off. Okay. So what should we do next? I think we need to get a little bit of green in here. I think that would be quite satisfying, painting some green. So which green should we paint first? I think we'll mix the darker green first, and then we'll kind of lighten it up with a little bit of white to send it a little further back into the background. So the question will be, what green do we want to make? Because we can make lots of different kinds of greens. So let's just take a look here. If we were to use our cool blue and cool yellow and mix a green, this is the kind of green we're going to get. And often that's what people want. They want the brightest possible color. But you notice we haven't used any of these colors right out of the tube in this painting. And I don't think we will in any place. Like, I'm just looking at it, I can't imagine we would do that. So if we painted like the grass this green, like it would look silly. It would look really weird. So what we want is we want a green that is less intense, less saturated, right? So let's look, if we look at the warm blue and the warm yellow, right? They're getting crossing almost right across from one another on the color wheel, right? Its complementary color is purple, but if the blue is pretty darn close. So, and because of that, the green that it creates is a much less intense green. It looks a little bit more like dried grass. Like, this reminds me of Calgary, where I'm from, pretty much year-round. There's always kind of a bit of this yellowish green grass, right? Versus Victoria, where a lot of my relatives live, they do get pretty darn, everything's super lush. It's like a rainforest out there, so they do get much brighter greens. But anyway, I think what we want is something closer to this, right? Warm yellow and warm yellow, warm yellow and warm blue, I mean. So, let's mix it up. So let's take some of our warm yellow, and where should we paint this? Why don't we paint it right over here? So we got our warm yellow. Warm yellow, I just put that there, scooped it out. Let's take some of our warm blue. We won't need nearly as much of it. Let's just mix them together. So without really even doing too much of this color, we're pretty much there, right? This is the underlying, we call like the local color of these trees. Let's just add a little bit more blue to them. More blue, obviously the darker that color will get. So I think, well, let's kind of stay, we won't go super dark yet. We will darken them, obviously, but let's just, we'll do a pass with the trees and grass, or the trees like this first. And then we can always darken things. Right? It's so much easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. So let's zoom in again. And I'm just gonna see how kind of rough I paint this in. We can actually now see a little bit more of his colors there. I actually see some pinks and things coming through there. It wouldn't have surprised me if his first color could have been a pink underpainting. That would probably explain a lot, all those pink clouds and everything. Okay, you know what, I'm just going to take the same green. I'm going to go up brush sizes a little bit here. I'm trying to use this quite small brush. Notice how, like, as I'm painting this, I am, you know, trying to almost paint it like I'm painting grass or something. I'm not just doing big, quick, one brush stroke right across. Kind of like these small brush strokes. Just have to mix a bit more. It's kind of running out. Oops, right over here. Okay. I'm just going to keep going with this same color painting. I'll probably darken these a little bit and add some gray to them as I do my next pass over top of them. See how I can now paint right over top of these trees without worrying too much about anything disappearing. And again, I know it seems like, you know, I paint this tree and I paint the next one. It's just about, like, I just want to create that texture of the trees and the leaves and okay. Okay, let's zoom back out again. Okay, so that's feeling pretty good. What I want to do now, let's take a little bit of, we're going to take the same color, let's mix a bit more of it. Don't need too much more of it. I'm just going to take a bit of white and mix that in. And same color, just a little bit of white. That's a bit too big of a brush. Okay. Okay. I even see there's some green in the mountains a little bit, so we'll paint that as we get a little closer to there. In fact, I'm just going to clean these brushes off. Put them in the water to soak for a second. I think I'm going to just add a little bit even more white here and get some of these highlights that he's got on the grass here. Couple extra little patches like that. Let me just see. I'm just going to delicately paint a bit of this. So this is just the same green that I used in the grass. Like, look how different it looks down here. Right? It looks like, and then I paint it up here and it looks just gray, right? Doesn't look very green at all. Okay. Maybe while I'm mixing some white into some color, remember we mixed this brown before? I'm going to take a bit of white and some of that brown. And just do some of this pathway. That's a bit too white, but just want to lay this color in and I can paint other things over top of it later. Okay. Let's do this bear. In fact, I'm just going to use that same paint that we used right off the beginning. Oh, it's kind of mostly dried up. So I'm just going to mix it again. So to get this dark color to make the bear, let's just take some cool blue. Won't need too much of it. Cool blue, warm blue, and this time we'll make it a little bit closer to us. So let's take some warm red and a bit of warm yellow. Now if we put white into this, it's going to turn into a warm gray, which we will do in a second, but let's first paint. I don't think we'll do it just yet. Well, we're going to paint the bear here. Poor mama bear just noticed that her kids climbed up into the tree and is a little bit scared because that branch is getting kind of it's bending. Again, we're going to paint over a bunch of this stuff. I just figured I'd just take a second to... Okay. So we zoom out. So, you know, we've been painting really on this painting for about an hour and a little bit, right? So, and this is what we've got after about an hour. Not bad, because basically we've got, this is what I would consider like a really good underpainting, right? We did that first layer of yellow, perfect. That got us set up, and then we did this, and now this is where we start refining it. Now we start going into the details, and we can paint over things, paint things out if they're not in the right place. But you know, for any artist, if you're, especially if you're working on, let's say, a larger canvas, this would be where you'd probably want to be after like your first day of painting. You'd want to have a really strong underpainting that kind of it's like the foundation to a building, right? We've got all the basics in place, the structure's there. And time for a little bit of tea. Deborah says, "We will miss your amazing work, Peter. Keep posting them. I am so far behind. I will have to do this summer. This summer. Or I will have lots to do this summer also." Heidi says, "I find it hard to keep up and get out of debt." Well, always remember that, you know, you can pause the live stream and you can take a break whenever you want. And I think another thing that you certainly have my permission to do is to stop working on this painting entirely. If you're not happy with it, there's no reason why you have to see it through. I mean, I would strongly encourage you to do that. I think even if you're not happy with it, it's very satisfying to like rescue a painting. That's the way I always think about it. But at the same time, like, if you're not feeling it, or you don't enjoy the composition or whatever, you can stop, right? So, because that's something that took me a long time to figure out, is that, you know, sometimes a painting, no matter what you do, it's just going to fight you and fight you and fight you. And then other paintings you work on, they just, you know, like, you had me at hello, right? You're just like, It just seems to come effortlessly out. I would say that is definitely the unicorn of the painting process. 99% of the time, it's a bit of a negotiation would be the best word to describe making a painting, and there's often some struggle involved. But anyway, okay. I think, what should we do next? I think what I want to do is I want to introduce some of this, the peachy pink that we see, like in the clouds up here, and there's actually quite a lot of pink, which again makes me think that this painting probably had a pink underpainting to start, rather than a yellow one like we used. But you know, that would be definitely a different strategy than we've used before. But let's mix that kind of pinkish color. I think it's a bit more, yeah, well, let's see. I would wager that he's using a warm red and some white. Probably a little bit of, yeah, let's get more yellow in there. And then we need a lot more white. Okay. So let's take this color and we're going to paint it in a bunch of different places here. Even though there isn't anything, I'm going to paint a little bit of pink up there. Here on these rocks. On the tips of these trees, got a bit of that pink kind of coming through. Just this nice kind of warmth that it makes it kind of look a little bit like the golden hour. You know, this is really interesting. I would never ever have thought about putting this pink in here, but it actually is kind of nice. I like this, and that's what, you know, all of this is all about, is learning from different artists from different cultures, different periods of time, and realizing how much different people can teach us. Like, yeah, it would never would have occurred to me to put pink in a landscape like this. But this will go into my back pocket for possible solutions. That's cool. That's really neat. Like, look, that's great. I love that. Huh. Put a bit on these edges. Now remember, we might paint over some of this, but it will remain there. Kind of like a ghostly kind of hint of something. I'm going to put a bit in the rocks too. Not much. It's probably good enough there. Yeah, a bit more of this pink. There. And my brush is very dry, so I'm just using that dry brush just to kind of brush around. Cool. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? Steal a bit more of that pink and put a bit of it on that tree. Might be going a little overboard, but bring some of that pink into the grass here. I'm going to paint a bunch of that out, but I'm digging the way that wow, it really makes things glow. Who would have thought? Deborah says, Heidi, Deborah says, Heidi, I am learning to give myself permission not to paint every painting or follow the class to learn new techniques that Michael teaches us. That is what I did with the Bateman painting. Also, I learned from Michael's drawing classes, drawing lesson 14, where we learned about blocking in shapes. I could have used that for the eagle, for it's a little off. Laugh out loud. Yeah, in the drawing class, which is linked down below, 40 episode drawing class I did last summer. I think we're talking about the envelope method that I was talking about. Is sort of imagine getting a block of, or you want to make a sculpture, and you need to find the block of marble that you're going to chisel that image out of, right? And kind of working, rather than from the inside out, working from the outside shape and chiseling it down to its kind of form. Or Michelangelo would say, unlocking the image from the block. Heidi says, Michael, your painting is more autumn in France. The original is more depressing. And Deborah says, yes, the envelope method. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, what should we do next? You know, I was planning on doing the sky again. I don't mind the sky as it is right now. It is a little bit brighter blue than the original. I think I'm going to just do a quick little pass of cool blue and white over top of it. I might even put a little bit of glazing fluid in there just to make it a little bit thinner. So let's see, we're running out of space on this palette. So I'm going to take some white, take some blue, let's mix that together. Do have all these grays. Let's take a bit of yellow and red and blue. a lot more blue on here. Okay, so this right now it's kind of a bit more of an electric blue. Put some glazing fluid in here. That's going to make it a little bit more transparent. And let's just see. Again, I'm just going to paint right over top of these birds. It's definitely becoming way more blue than his painting, but you know, I don't mind it. That's the thing about making a painting, is you just sort of like, how faithful do I really want to be to the original? And if the painting starts taking you in a different direction, do you follow its siren call? Or do you stay the course? That's always the conundrum for every artist. I don't know, guys. I think I'm gonna let it go really bright. Okay, so I'm glazing it. You can see there's a little, it got a bit patchy there, so I'm gonna blast it with some the air. And then I'm going to just kind of come back once it's dry, in any place that is a little patchy I can correct. That definitely makes it, it makes it a lot more electric. I probably went a little bit nuts with that blue, whereas it's way, way, way more gray, and I guess that's, yeah. I could, even right now, I could probably, if I got my rag wet, I could do a reasonable job of wiping it off. I'd probably wipe off other things are underneath and make a bit of a mess, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's, in fact, I just did what I... Okay, so I would say the sky is definitely done. Arguably was done before I went in and started messing with it, but yeah. You know, again, that's another reason why, you know, we've been talking about using carbon paper. You could use the white carbon paper if you, there's a link to it in the description below. And you could use the white carbon paint. Let's say you painted all this out, you know, blue or green or orange or black. You could use the white tracing paper to, or carbon paper, to transfer those birds back on top, and then you'd have them. So if you're feeling lost, it's just it's just a matter of what kind of tool can you use to dig yourself back out of that hole, right? I'm just looking at the original here. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to work on the mountains, start working on the grass. So yeah, let's just do that. Let's start working on those mountains again. So we've got, I like all the colors we have here. He's got a bit more of a yellowish kind of hue on top of some of this here. So let's follow that. I'm going to use some cool yellow because I want it to go further into the background. So I'm going to take this cool yellow, take some white, and we'll just see what we get when we do that. That's pretty good. I'm going to take just a little bit of cool red. So oddly enough, what that does is it kind of turns the paint a bit into a warm, it appears a bit more like a warm yellow, but it's actually it's like a warm yellow that's been desaturated a little bit. Okay. And this cool yellow orange, I think, works kind of well in the background here. Right? It makes things kind of glow. And now we've got all these other colors that we painted underneath that are kind of showing through a bit. And you're like, why you just painted out all that stuff that you spent all that time? Well, I didn't spend that much time working on it, right? Okay, in fact, I am just going to add a little bit of warm yellow back into a few places. So here's just a bit of warm yellow on my brush. Catching like kind of the intensity of the light hitting. A few places, cool. Okay. And then I'm just going to take this same thing, and you see there's a bit of yellow in here. I have to do that. That might be a little bit of a highlight that comes after. It doesn't seem, before all of this pink dries up, I'm just going to put a bit of it back. Alright, so that kind of back and forth, bit of more pink back in there. Okay, so, wow, that is really, really blue, isn't it? It definitely looks bluer than it, on screen than it is in person. It's radically different than the original, though. I'll give that for sure. But again, I don't mind it. It's yeah. Huh. Just a much warmer kind of sky, a different time of day, really. Deborah says, well, Michael, what I meant, Michael, I meant that I do not need to paint every painting. Just listen and watch you, the master, show me techniques like the Bateman painting. I learned so much, but I cannot keep up, so I just enjoy. I think I think that's what I understood you to mean. Not the whole me being the master part. I do appreciate that, though. Very generous. I mean, honestly, each one of these paintings that we paint, I'm learning a ton of stuff, right? Even just this idea of using the pink in a landscape. I'm sure that other people, Western European artists have done that. I just don't see it very much at all. So I'm not really sure where, I don't know if that's something that is part of Indian culture to use the pink in that way, or maybe it could be, observing the light in India. Who knows? But I think those are little things I put in my back pocket as like possible solutions to problems that I can think like, oh, I remember I did this painting, the Trilok Singh painting, and we used some pink in the kind of the highlights, and that gave it a kind of real warm golden hour kind of look. Maybe that's what I can use in this painting to solve the problem. It's not turning out the way I want, so I'm going to put some pink in there. Anyway. So, I'm going to do a little bit more of this gray in the background. I know it feels kind of like that was, I was maybe finished with that area. but it's always a bit of like back and forth, back and forth. So I'm going to mix a bit more gray again. Cool blue, warm blue. Let's take some cool yellow and cool red. Maybe a little too much red in there. Let's put more blue back in there. And let's take some white again. So that's probably a little bit closer to the sky. This is the color that I put in the sky. This probably would have been a little bit better of the color to put in there, but so putting a bit more red in there to make it a bit more of a purpley quality, just like in here. And let's kind of go back over. It's just sort of like touching it up. In fact, I think I need a bit more white in there. It's a little bit too dark. If it's too dark, it's going to want to come forward too much. Right? Rather than kind of just existing in the background, it's going to compete with the forward shapes. I'm also, as I'm looking at the way that he's painted these mountains, it's really quite gorgeous. I just don't, I'm not going to have the time to kind of give the same amount of attention to detail that he's done here, but they are, wow, that is kind of special. Okay, so that's good. I am going to go back to a little bit of the darker one that I did use, or mixed. Remember I said I painted that, it was too dark. Just to get some of the darkest parts of the shadows in here. And that was a little too heavy-handed as well, right? But and then I'm going to go the opposite direction, and I'm just going to take even more white. And actually a little bit of yellow in here. So sorry, just what I'm doing here is I just took a bunch more white Took some yellow and cool blue. He's got a bit of, like a little bit of green happening in a few places. Need to... Okay. Okay, I gotta move on from the background here. Okay, so what should we do next? I feel pretty satisfied. This. You can tell I'm always a bit heavy-handed. That's just, you know, me and my own style of painting. And okay. Let's do the green. Let's do some... let's do a warm green. Some more warm yellow. Go for a bit of a darker green. Haven't really done that yet, and I think that will also help balance the picture. Let's get more warm blue in here, because right now the background is very dominant. So a bit over some of this pink, just a little bit of a pink halo there. I'm just going to go even darker. Just adding more blue. Okay. Take this same color. Build up some of these trees in the background here. Okay. These are all... I'm going to have to come back and give some definition to these trees here. In a little bit. We'll just... We're starting to kind of getting into some of the darker areas inside the forest here. Take a bit more of yellow green and just add a bit of white to it. So this is the same green with a little more yellow and just a tiny bit of white in there. Definitely going overboard here as I'm rushing. There's this kind of halo of bushes right up here. It's got that red, orangey quality in there, so I'm going to capture that. I'm going to put the same little bits of that orange into the pathway a bit there. I'm probably going to darken a bunch of that anyway. So what should we do next? You know, I'm going to take the same green. I'm just going to define the darker areas around these bushes here. So to help kind of make that darker, I'm actually going to take a bit of the cool blue and a bit of warm blue together. Those two blues, when they combine, will help create a much darker color. So it's like I'm going to darken the green. Kind of a brown. That's a little too brown now. That's okay. So we'll just take this, we'll mix it again. Get some of this kind of brown that's happening underneath all of these trees where it gets kind of dark. Put put it on one side of this tree. Okay. As I start doing some of this, I'm getting closer to starting to finish some of these areas. Oh, you know, obviously I could paint on them for a while, but I only have so much time, right? I know some of these branches look kind of dark. We're going to put some highlights back on top of them. Okay. Just going to go back in a few places where I want a little bit more of the brown trunk to be visible. And then I'm going to go and add a little bit of white and yellow into the same brown. Oops, sorry. I took white and warm yellow, mixing it into here. And we'll just look for a few places where we can add a gentle highlight. And then a little bit of the same branch, or same color in the branches of a few of these other trees. Okay. It's looking better and better as we go and we go, right? Okay, let's take a second here. Lori says, I was just thinking that you always make a painting. I was just thinking that you always make a painting your own. That's what I want to do, but it's so hard. I can't stop copying. Ah, great, great statement, I guess. Question. How do you make it more your own? I think that comes with experience. Honestly, it just comes with practice and doing like what we're doing and just doing it over and over and over. That's why I want to do a ton of episodes, so that the more of these you paint, even if they're paintings you're not super interested in, you know, if some people say, I don't want to paint portraits, or maybe too many landscapes, or I wish we painted more animals. I mean, by all means, if you really want to do if you really want to focus more on those, do lots of them. And I think you'll certainly get better at that. But it's like, even just doing the things you're less interested in, sometimes that gives you more permission to be a little bit wild, or if things go off the rail, you're like, you know, I didn't even want to paint this anyone anyway. So I can now be a little bit silly with it. I don't have to be so precious with it. You know, whereas if you're trying to paint great paintings all the time, like the paintings that you love all the time, that can actually, you're almost setting yourself up for a little bit of a failure, because you're going to be so obsessed with making it perfect, like you said, that you just end up getting frustrated, because, you know, we're looking at the greatest artists in human history, right? I mean, Trilok Singh is he. If you go to Punjab in India, northwestern India, there are streets and schools and government buildings. There's major awards. People are writing their PhD theses about him. There's, you know, a whole economy based on this one artist and all the great work that he did, right? And just like any of the others we've talked about, right? So, it's just a matter of, I think, practicing over and over and over and over again. One of the books, do I have it handy? We talk about in one of my, I don't know where I put it. These are a disaster here, but one of my favorite books is called Art and Fear, and by Bales and Orland, I think. Let me see if I can dig it up. Because in Art and Fear, Yeah, so here it is, Art and Fear. I make my students at Emily Carr read this book, Art and Fear, because you can see 15.58 Canadian, which is like 20 cents American. It's just a fabulous book. And here's War of Art. I've got that book right here behind me as well. Anyway, that's a great book because it really talks about the experience of being an artist and the ups and downs of being an artist. And one of the things they talk about is making, at least when you're a beginner, that you should privilege quantity over quality. And that the more you make, the faster you make, you'll move through those beginner stages faster than if you obsess over making one great painting, right? In the time it takes to make one absolutely perfect painting, you could make 20 average paintings. But you will learn way more over those 20 paintings than you will over that one painting, right? So it's just about just moving through, and if you're making a lot of paintings, you become less precious with them, and I think that less precious state of being in that state where you kind of really almost don't care if it turns out or not. That's where your own style can kind of break through. It's like it's a little opening that you're leaving for your inner style to kind of bust open, right? Because when you're giving too much love and respect to any of these paintings, then I think it can actually hinder you rather than help you. Okay, enough ranting, Michael. Let's go to the other greens down here, and then after we'll work on the birds and the bears and stuff. So I want to take this warm yellow, warm green, and I'm going to use a fairly small brush. I'm going to paint. Well, let's start out with, it's still a relatively small brush, and kind of just go around. I want to keep a little bit of some of the brighter yellow in places. So if I see it, and even some of the pinks and stuff, I don't want to get rid of all of this. Okay, I'm just putting a little bit more blue in my mix, warm blue. Sometimes just these little pops of color, there's not much of them, that can help. I'm going to make this go even darker. I might even actually put a little bit of black into my green. We'll see. We'll see when we get a little bit closer to the end here. In fact, I'm going to put a bit of, you go to a smaller brush here, the same sort of thing. I'm just going to start defining a little bit more. So this blue is a little intense. I'll probably go back over it with something not quite as dark, the blue. So I'll leave it up to how you guys want to approach some of these rocks and how well you want to define them. I'm just going to keep on darkening areas. This is kind of like the grass growing right up next to the rocks. Let's get even more bluish green underneath. Okay, I'm just going to put against some of this darker green, like little patches here in the foreground. Okay, so here's where we are after about 2 hours of painting. I feel pretty good about where we're at. Mostly, you know, I obviously I could spend a lot more time in the grass down here and on the tree. Even those mountains, I probably would take a little bit of the darker edge off here and make just a little bit more gray. But I'm just going to keep plowing forward. Ace says, I think it's Paula, right? Paula, it's nice to paint along when we cannot go outside for class. Thank you, Michael. I enjoy Tuesdays and Thursdays painting night. Thank you. I love that becomes part of your week or your days. I'm super honored to have so many beautiful people who are painting along with me. I'm telling you, it definitely gives meaning to my own life. I really appreciate that. Lori says, can you tell us a bit about how you found your style? Okay, sure. Give me one. I'll just read a few more of these comments here. Joshua says, wow, Michael, that is a really good field of pink flowers you have. I also love the mountains. Looks like a Bob Ross. Also, finding a style that fits can be enough to make your own painting. Lori says, thank you for explanation. Gives me hope. I'm going... I'm going to watch this over and over until it sinks into my mind, heart and brush strokes. Deborah says, I agree with Heidi, and yours is more colorful and happy. I appreciate that. Yeah, maybe while let me see, what do I want to do next, and then I'll start my next ramble. Okay, so let's I think let's do the animals next. Which ones should we do? You know, I'm gonna blow dry this just so I can rest my hand on the canvas without worrying about smudging anything. Okay, so let's take a look at these birds. We'll work from the top left corner so that we can get the right side will be nice and dry. Okay. So, and I'm all the way zoomed in that my camera can go. So, what I want to do is I'm going to mix a really dark blue. Actually, I'm just zoom out while I do this here. I'm going to need a little bit more of each blue. We're not going to be, we don't have much of the painting left, so I don't need a lot of either color, but okay. So let's mix it just right here. We'll take some cool blue. I'm going to take some warm blue. I'm going to take a bit of cool red. It gives me a bit more of a purple. And we'll take a little bit of white. Maybe I'll even just mix that to the side here. I'm really zoomed out, aren't I? Okay. This is good. I've got a few different colors. So now I've got this. It doesn't really show up very well on camera, but this is a bit more of a dark purple. And then we've got kind of a grayish purple. And of course we've got our other blues here on the sides. So I'm going to go and get my smallest brush. We'll do all these details with a really small brush. I'm going to pretty much paint, I think, mostly everything with my darker color. And let's I'm going to do these wings. As I said, you don't have to worry about painting all of these birds, right? Maybe you only paint one of them, or you could eliminate them altogether. I mean, there's no law saying you've got to do the painting as it is. You're all off in your in the privacy of your own homes, and you can go in whatever direction you like. So that I probably, yeah, the neck and the body of that bird I probably could have done a little bit more better job on that, but I'm just going to paint the whole bird in here. Right, we're talking like this is pretty small details, right? Like this whole area is, you know, like this is the size of my computer mouse. So don't worry about getting all of the tiny details like the beak and all that kind of stuff done. Here's this. I think it's a goose. Yeah, if I was to do this again, I'd probably spread these birds out a little bit more. You notice I haven't painted any feet of these birds or anything yet. Just want to sort of get the basic shapes of all of them in here. Okay. Now I'm going to do just, I think, you know, well, these legs are going to be pretty tough to do. Okay. So maybe while I'm right here, I'm just gonna now, remember I mixed some other paint. I had this a little bit more of a gray. Let's take that and I'm just gonna try to apply it selectively. This bird. There's not a lot of room to work here, so these are just going to be a kind of pretty generic. I don't think that worked. It does help to kind of define one wing being a little further behind than the other. Okay, I think I'll leave that. I might come back and add maybe a little bit more gray onto the hawk just to differentiate from the other birds. And maybe put a little bit of color on that one, but we'll see. So that's a good little bit of progress there. Let's go to the bears now. Back to my darker color. Got bear hanging off the tree. These bears are pretty funny the way they're. It's like two little bears on this branch. Definitely kind of a little bit muddy, hard to kind of determine exactly what's going on here. I'm just going to widen its back and make them a little bit bigger. Okay. Do the same thing. I've got this lighter gray. I don't know. They're pretty tricky to get some of those details at this scale. Let's go down here to the bear at the bottom. I'm going to put some black in here in a few minutes on top of this bear. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of color of this blue. Same thing, we'll take a bit of the See a bit of red in its mouth, so I'm just going to take a bit of warm red right out of the tube. Fix this branch while I'm right here, just add a little bit of a darker outline. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to break out a little bit of black here. And I'm just going to use it in a very few small places here. I'm going to take this black, I'm going to mix in with a little bit of this blue. Okay, getting the undersides here. The nose, where the eye goes, one ear, the other ear. Outline around the back. Okay, let's come up and do the same thing with the other bear up here. Okay, let's look at these birds again. I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna just darken, I think these like crows or parts of them, and then maybe I'll lighten up the other one here. Getting the tips of these wings. And then let's go the opposite direction. Let's get some white. It's the first time I've actually made gray with black and white in this entire painting. It needs to be even more white, more brighter, lighter color. Get a bit of yellow onto my brush, so I'm taking some white and warm yellow or cool yellow. Let's see if I can do a little tiny claw here. Kind of hard to see that. Let's do another pass at that. To do this, what I'm doing is I get my paint on my brush and then I'm spinning it out to try to get as sharp of an edge as possible. Ay, that was too wide. That's okay, because I can just then take my dark color again and trim it down. I'm going to put a bit of little white dot. I think, is there a white dot on the eye of this? There isn't, but I'm going to do it anyway. Couple tiny little dots for eyes on there. Okay, so I think I've got like the majority of everything locked in. What do I want to do? I want to just touch up this pathway with some brown. Maybe do a little bit of work on these rocks and then we'll be done. Okay, so this brown, if I want to mix a little bit more of it, let's take some warm red, warm yellow, warm blue. Alright, and if that's too dark, let's just take more warm yellow. Squeeze a bit more out on here. Don't need much of it, so okay. So I got my color. So I want to think about this pathway, you know, maybe it's just a pure like animal path, or maybe people go on it. If people go on it, it might have, you know, maybe like wagon ruts or something in it. And so if there's a wagon, you know, it's probably in the middle, which almost looks like what he's done there. Is a little bit lighter. Some of the same brown and putting it in the background here. Okay. Just getting it, put a little bit of black into my brown. Again, you know, as I say often, almost every single painting, you know, when I get to this stage, I'm barely looking at the original, even though it's up on the screen. I just, and it, you know, to kind of go back to that whole question of style and how we find style. It's kind of a little bit just like this. You just sort of go, okay, well, you know, I'm pretty fine with just allowing this painting to be what it is and not try to fight it and make it something else. So that's Man, all this stuff that he's doing in here is awesome. Definitely, you know, this is some great brushwork that he's got going on in here. Man. The rocks, especially on this side of the path, he's got I really like the way his kind of just slopes up and into the forest here. So in order to sort of just get a little bit darker, I'm mixing the brown, and then I put a lot more blue, warm blue, into that. I'm gonna have to wind up here very soon, so. Okay, I'm just going to go back to these rocks for a little bit. Interesting. So I'm debating to myself how I want to approach these rocks down here. You know, when I look at his, I feel like, oh, I got to do a lot more work. And this again goes back to what we've been talking about throughout today's episode, is how closely do I want to hew to the original, and how much latitude or freedom do I want to give myself to reinterpret things or to find my own way here. Do I want to try to get these other animal forms painted in, or can I are they necessary? Those are, you know, all great questions. Personally, I'm just, as I think I've said a few times, I'm not super invested in this. And the more that I start to kind of fiddle there, the more I feel like I'm making those kind of things more obvious than maybe they should be. So, you know, right now I'm painting these rocks without even, I haven't really looked at the original in a little while here. So okay. Really gotta wrap up here. Something with that tree that drives me not sitting well with me. Got just a tiny bit of black in this green. A little bit of black is helpful. I wouldn't put it everywhere. I'm only putting it in this front tree. And a few places in the foreground. I don't want to put any black back there, otherwise it's going to compete and kind of come forward. If I want to put some black here, I'm going to add just a little bit of white to it. So it can still go gray, so it can go gray, but not quite black. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a tiny bit of glazing just to darken some of this area here. I'm going to take the gray with glazing fluid and I'm just going to get a different brush. Now I can kind of come in here and just darken things up just a little bit. Right, it's like super subtle effect, but you can even use this for the rocks too if you wanted. Okay. Well, folks, I think I'm going to do a quick glaze with some warm yellow, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to take glazing fluid, put a little here, let's get a little bit of green, yellow. Okay. I could paint on this all night long, but I'm gonna have to give our daughter a bath here in a couple minutes. So, what's my name again? It is Michael. And I don't even remember what's the date today. Wow, cool. It's definitely growing on me. Even things that I wasn't so happy with, I feel like have kind of resolved themselves. Even, you know, that big bright sky, I think it now kind of works. Parts that I wish I had more time to do would be really detailing in these trees. Probably this middle ground, or kind of, I guess it's the background here, not the mountains themselves, although these are a little bit dark, but this area here was, I kind of ran out of time to define. Pretty happy with the way this looks. I like the way that the eagles and the bears, which are really the essential parts of this picture, look. Oh, there's things I can see right now that I want to do, but I gotta run, folks. Thank you so much for joining me for this painting. Man, Trilok Singh, you were a great artist. You have posed a great challenge, but the thing that I'm going to take away mostly is going to be that pink. That's something I did not expect. I didn't even think about it until we were doing it, and then I saw it, like little broken branches on the trees. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Cool. It's been fun walking a little while in your shoes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to the channel. I know most of you have, but then actually, well, no, actually, about half of the people, or more than half of the people that watch these episodes don't like the episode or subscribe to the episode, even though they devote 3 or 4 hours of their time to it. So that would be super helpful. If you want to leave a small or large donation, there's the PayPal link down below. In just a couple of days, we're going to do a complete 180. We're going to look at Batman, the original Batman, the very, very first Batman. He looks a little bit different than the one that you've seen in the movies, although apparently the new movie with Robert Pattinson, that's, who knows when that's going to come out with the way things are in the world these days, that one is kind of going back to the painting, or to the character that we're going to make a painting of on Thursday. So all May, we are going to focus on painting some of the artists that we love. It's Masters May, or Master May, so we're going to be painting all great artists. Almost all of them are Chinese artists, and I think we're gonna go into some whole new territory. I'm super, super excited about I mean, there's obviously millions of amazing Chinese artists out there for us to paint, but I think the ones that that are my personal favorites are gonna provide us for a lot of really exciting classes. I'm really excited with the way things are right now and where the direction we're headed. So I look forward to having you guys join me on that adventure. And thank you so much for celebrating Sikh History Month here in Canada over the past few episodes. So we will see you guys on Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we may do a special feedback episode on this Saturday. So mark your calendars down for that as well. Okay, folks, we will see you then. Enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, wherever on this beautiful planet you may be. I've been really honored to share this time with you. We'll see you then. Okay, good night, everybody.